COVID-19 sort of changing this. The very fact that we're having this virtually is a result of COVID-19. And I thought it would be good for us to sort of just like, pull away the curtain and stop pretending like everything is normal, because everything is not normal. Things are radically different, and people are coping with it differently. People are dealing with it differently. So I thought it would be fun to have a little segment on here about how we're sort of handling quarantine. So I'd love to see questions, comments, feedbacks, both in the Slack and in the Slido session. But before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and bring on my guest. I'll allow Tine and Eryan to introduce themselves. Tine, welcome to the program.
Hello. So yeah, I'm Tine Zekis. Tine is short for Christine. I think that usually helps people. In my former life, I was a high school math teacher. And a while back, I was subbing for a teacher who was also teaching AP Computer Science. And it was basically like a Java 1 class. And I realized I really liked coding. And I didn't like forcing a bunch of high schoolers to be in a room listening to me talk about math. So about 5 years ago, I did a boot camp. I was in dev boot camp and been a software engineer ever since. Now I'm a software engineer working at Centro in Chicago along with Jeff.
Awesome. And bringing into the program, Eryan, what's going on, man? Oh, I think you're muted. There we go.
Oh, thanks. How's it going?
Good. Want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, my name is Eryan Cobham. I'm the Director of Engineering at ThinkCERCA, an educational software application so as you can imagine, we're kind of busy right now. Like Tine, I'm actually a career switcher also. About 10 years ago, I was practicing law here in Chicago. I was miserable, and I had already done some computer programming, taking some computer science classes and stuff like that in undergrad. And so I decided to make the switch, started doing some consulting, some freelance work, and that was enough to kind of get me in the door. Started at Sears, worked there for a couple of years, worked for the 2012 Obama campaign here in Chicago. And after that, I was at a consulting company also here for about 6 years. And then I started last year as the Director of Engineering at ThinkCERCA.
All right. So, we'll start with the easy question. Like, how's quarantine going so far? Like, is everyone completely stir crazy yet or what?
I mean, I guess that's an easy question. Yeah. So I'm in a bit of a unique situation. I'm actually on maternity leave. I have a 9-week-old son and a 2-year-old daughter. So we are just getting through. But pretty soon I'll have to start balancing that with working from home, and that will be an interesting picture as well. But yeah, trying to get a 2-year-old's energy out for the day has been rough. And her not understanding why we can't go see grandma and grandpa or our cousins. So yeah, we're definitely feeling being stuck inside for sure.
Yeah, same here. I have a five-year-old and a 3-year-old. And so they're just like, at least they have each other to play with, but they're just bouncing off the walls every day, trying to make sure that we keep them entertained. They have like assignments and everything that they're getting from school that we're trying to help them with. But my wife and I are kind of alternating where I'll be working in the morning and she's watching them, and then in the afternoon she's working and I'm watching them. And so there's always that kids, there's always that competition for who gets the attention.
Yeah, we're sort of in a similar boat. And I think one of the things that sort of like drove me to sort of think about this was, so I've got a 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they're doing the homeschooling thing now. And it's amazing that at work, there's clearly like, two sides of the equation, right? There's people that have kids, right? And the people that have kids are really struggling because they're not able to keep up, because all of these different facets of life, right? So, now at home, I have this sort of intersectionality that never really existed before. I have to be a parent, I have to be a teacher, I have to be a manager, I have to be an employee, I have to be a spouse, and I have to do it all within this little home office here, right? Like I used to be able to, get on a train and leave one persona and adopt the other. And I've been really, really struggling with that transition. So, I'm curious how you're handling sort of moving through these spaces really quickly throughout the day.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, even during the times when I'm supposed to be working, if I had come downstairs for something and I see that both kids are like fighting for my wife's attention, then I'll usually have to like take a break, stop, work with one of them to kind of get them settled and working on something, and then go back. And I, like you, I really used to enjoy having that division between like when I'm doing stuff at work, when I'm home and can kind of focus on the family and everything else that needs to be done. Because even though most of the company works remotely, we have an office, and so I was always going into the office because that was just an easier division for me. Even though the kids were at school, it still helped me to kind of get away from the house, do stuff there, and then go home. And so there just isn't that same ability to create that space anymore.
Right. And I'm even having trouble just distinguishing between the days, right? Did I wear this shirt yesterday? Like, I'm trying to remember, like, did I shower today? Right. I mean, that stuff is real. And also, my kids are at an age, so my spouse is a stay-at-home dad. So my childcare actually is in the house, which is amazing. But, both of our children are kind of at an age where they need attention 24/7, like there has to be someone with one of them all the time. So we're kind of both on 24/7 on parenting duties, and we have to remember to be spouses sometimes, and we have to remember to be alone sometimes. And that can be hard in a small space. So, we're trying to work on that before I have to go back to work and then start throwing in that coworker piece as well. So we'll see.
It's funny how the grass is always a little greener, right? Because I have friends that are single and they're quarantined alone and they're like desperate. They're starving for human contact, right? Where I'm on the other side of that and I'm like, man, what I would give to be alone just for a little bit. And
right.
What's funny is that I find that my social calendar is almost more loaded now than it was previously, between Zoom meetings to hang out, like video game sessions. Sometimes I really do just have to stop and say, like, you know what, I need to be alone in my feelings for a little bit. I need to be able to process this because one, as a parent, you know what I mean? You're trying to put up the good face. But that gets a little bit exhausting after a bit of time. So, what are you guys doing? Or do you guys have like a routine where you're sort of decompressing on a daily basis? Do you guys have a strategy for coping with it? Because right now I'm literally just like, you know what, I'm going to go play some video games. And my wife's just like, okay. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think my current strategy is going to need some adjusting soon. Right now my spouse and I are sort of splitting the late night shift and the early morning shift, where like one of us is asleep while the other one's kind of just alone and like enjoying the quiet with no kids. But that's not going to be sustainable when I have to start, having slept and talking to people at 9 a.m. because right now I'm on the late night shift. So I'm up until maybe like 3 or 4 a.m. and I'm there when the different kids wake up. And then I go to bed and sleep late, and then my spouse has a quiet morning. But we're gonna have to figure something out. Otherwise, the infant is actually sleeping through the night, which is amazing. But nobody told the 2-year-old that would be a nice thing to do. So we're working on it.
So we got a few questions coming in. One, will we take the opportunity to make the kind of change to modern work we all know is necessary and only now possible, or are we going to fall back into the familiar and the broken? And I think that's such a strong question because we're starting to recognize how some of this is sort of unsustainable, right? And I don't know that anyone is openly saying it. Like we talk about it in our little circles, but I don't know that anyone's up front and forward and saying like, listen, this can't be done because everyone is expecting that I'm not doing anything but this other thing, right? My schools think like, oh, you're at home not doing anything, so I can change the school schedule 15 minutes before class, and it's not going to be a problem. So I think, there's going to be a deep examination in some companies. Other companies, it'll be business as usual. But the really good ones, I think, are going to take this time to sort of reflect and figure out what they can do to support people a bit better. What are your thoughts?
I would hope that there's some kind of reexamination of that sort. I'm kind of pessimistic about it. I don't know that a lot of companies are really going to want to stay like this, where they kind of give the employees the kind of freedom that they know they might need to work at home or to have these like more flexible schedules. But I do think there's going to be a whole lot more appreciation for teachers. I hope so. I would pay my teachers. I would pay my kids' teachers as much as they want at this point, because it is a lot. And it's been 3-4 weeks now that they've been home and doing assignments. And my daughter's in kindergarten, so it's not like they're doing anything super difficult. It's not like she's missing anything that's so crucial that I think that can't be made up. But it's still, you kind of see, you appreciate how much work goes into it a little bit more. And so, I saw some tweet a couple weeks ago where it kind of showed how so many things that we take for granted as these like really important rules of society are just made up, essentially. And they do deserve to be reassessed. Because I think even in good times, they don't work for a lot of people. And so I think now really helps show that.
Yeah, I think I'm having a sort of a daily struggle between the optimist and pessimist in me. I really hope that people are re-examining some of these sort of arbitrary structures we have in place. And another part of me thinks that people have a really short memory. Everyone's saying they appreciate their teachers, but when we come time to say, okay, let's raise taxes and pay them more, I don't know how many people are going to, remember, what they were saying. So, I am hopeful that there are some companies that can at least see like, oh man, we saved a lot of money not putting electricity in that building every day. So maybe once a week we have everybody work from home or something. But I'm hoping that that people start to realize that 40 hours 9 to 5 is arbitrary, and that maybe there can be more flexibility, especially for folks who are trying to balance other things in their life. One of the things we always talk about with diversity in tech is making things accessible for parents. If you want to have people who are working parents also staying in the space, then they need some flexibility for things like, my school gets out at 3 or whatever it is.
Right. Absolutely. This was more of a comment, but I thought it was something worthwhile to talk about. With work from home, context switching takes on new meaning. We need to set boundaries and let others know what they are. And I think the key point of that statement is, and let others know what they are, because let's be clear, right? Your Slack status don't mean anything to anybody, right? Like, oh, you're busy, like starving a fire. Yeah, well, I just need to know the build failed and I need help with that, right? So, I think it's important that we sort of let folks know what the boundaries are, right? Like, we see these signals sort of get eroded over time, and we never really push back on it. Remember when the headphones was a thing, right?
No, I don't remember.
Now they tap you on your headphones like, hey, you busy?
I hope nobody ever taps me on my headphones. That seems disrespectful.
Yeah. So what are some ways that we can sort of communicate our boundaries in a way that's like firm, but at the same time not aggressive?
That's a really good question. I think, part of that is at an individual level, and part of that's going to have to be at a culture level for each company. I think that individuals can advocate for themselves and say, hey, these are my structures. And so depending on what works best for you, it could be, hey, I'm going to be really serious about my Slack status, or, hey, these are my hours that I'm, on kid duty, and these are my hours that I'm available. It will be different for everyone what that looks like. But then I think it's also up to the company culture to kind of step up and respect those boundaries, right? Like there's not going to be anyone who's like enforcing it, except for each other, right? So the hope is that people can be clear with their colleagues and then also respect each other's boundaries. But I don't know the larger answer to that.
Right.
Yeah, I think one thing that I think that my company did really well early on was that the chief of staff there made it really clear a lot of people that work there are parents, and they're going to have times when they're just unavailable. And I think a lot of us have tried really hard to make it clear to everybody else when we're going to be watching the kids. We're not going to be able to respond very quickly. We'll try to as we get, but there may be a period of 4 hours where we're just available. So if you need something, then you need to ask it before that time, or you need to ask it after that time, because kids don't care about your boundaries. So one thing I tried to do with my team, the people that I'm managing, is make sure every morning I was trying to put it in my Slack status, which hours I'd be available. Like, I'll be online until 1, and then after that I won't be available, or I'm out in the morning and I'll be available between like 1 and 4. And also put that same message like in the main Slack channel so that people would know. And just try to stick to that as much as possible. Like if I can help out with something, then I will. But people kind of need to know that other things are going to take the precedence over them.
Yeah, I think it's also. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I think it's also good to establish kind of amongst a team like what constitutes an emergency and what doesn't, just so people kind of know like when is even an okay time to send me a message, even though I'm not on, like whether to even be asking me to try to come to it at some point.
Right. Yep. Another question came in. Have you seen good practices companies help employees cope with the quarantine? So, it's interesting because I've been talking with people about this specifically to try to get ideas that I could, leverage and utilize with my team. And what I've noticed is that there has never really been a company-wide strategy. It's really been leader by leader. And different leaders have different expectations. So, my wife had an exchange with a leader in her organization and the statement was basically like, well, it's business as usual, right? And she's like, no, it ain't. Right. But at the same time, I've talked with other leaders where they're going through great pains to make sure that their staff feels comfortable, saying like, hey, I just need to get away for a little bit, or, being extra flexible with the schedule. So that's the only thing I've really been able to do as a leader myself is just like, make sure that it's flexible, make sure that people know like this is not normal and it's okay for it to not be normal. Sometimes we need a mental health day, right? Depending on your situation, you just need to be able to step away. So I think one thing that I've tried to do is be as open and honest about my situation as possible, just to sort of set an example where it's like, well, if Jeff said it was okay for him to walk with his kids from 3:30 to 4:30 around the block, maybe I can take that time too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think, leaders demonstrating the need for that flexibility, I think is huge. If your boss is always, working at midnight, it doesn't make it seem like it's okay for you to, go to sleep. But in terms of company-wide things, I think, there are at least resources that can be made available. I know, at Centro, we have access to a meditation app, and there's a resource for parents where there's all kinds of free like doctor's appointments you can have, so you can meet with a physical therapist after you've given birth, or you can meet with someone about transitioning into going back to work and things like that, and they're all online things that you can have for free. So it's more having those resources and encouraging people to use them. But, in terms of overall, I think you're right that the leadership example is going to be the biggest thing.
Yeah, totally agree.
All right. Next one. We all seem to be working harder as before, time shifting. How do we constrain ourselves? And, this is a really good one because I know for myself, for some reason, I have this myth that I was working 8 hours a day every day at the office, right? Like, oh yeah, just 8 hours of straight productivity, right? And then I go home. So at home, when I don't have those drive-bys and things like that, for some reason, if I don't feel like I've been chained to my desk for 8 hours, I feel like I didn't do a full day. And I feel guilty about that. So I think part of it is being realistic about, what it is that you were getting done before the pandemic with the drive-bys, with the water cooler talk. And then just setting realistic expectations. Like I love to start the morning off with a small checklist of things like, hey, if I get these 3 things done, it's a gravy day. Now, as soon as the day starts, someone comes and craps all over that list. but it's a goal, right? What are you guys doing to try to, keep yourselves in check?
I think for me, I've always felt like even when I was doing more, now it's mostly meetings that I'm in, but even when I was able to be kind of in front of a computer programming more, I always felt like if I get like three solid hours where I was actually, in front of my computer typing, then that was probably a good day. And I probably got I was focused enough to get stuff done. And now it's mostly about, it's similar to what you said, trying to get a few things that I know that I need to get accomplished. And it's a lot of prioritization. There are some things that, seemed important a few weeks ago that now I could not care less about. And so that's been a really big part of it for me.
So getting on a bit of a more personal note, right? Like, because we've got the work side of things, but then there's also our personal lives that we sort of have to keep together. How are you guys, so let's assume that this thing goes on till July, August, right? What are you guys doing with your partners to make a day special of any sort, right? Like how do you go about saying like, oh, we need a date night, right? And it's like, okay, ain't going nowhere. So how are we going to make this special?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We haven't had any special occasions that have come up yet. There's a couple coming up in the next few months. And I think the basement is going to get a lot of usage once the kids go to bed on a given night. Hanging out down there, maybe playing some video games, maybe watching a movie, stuff like that. Usually if we have like some quiet moments before both of us start falling asleep, pretty good. I think it's going to be a lot more purposeful effort to try and make sure that we save enough of the energy from during the day for each other, because that's always difficult.
Right.
Yeah, I think for us it's kind of remembering to take time each evening, sort of after the kids are asleep, to just be together and to ask each other where we're at mentally and check in. But and we also are trying to do some fun stuff. We decided recently we're going to rewatch every episode of Star Trek Next Gen, right? So we've got it's like a task, but then occasionally we'll be like, oh, hey, you want to throw in an episode? And it feels like a fun treat, even though it's nonsense, right? And then we're trying to also just sort of have just some little moments, like we try to turn things into a date, right? My spouse shaved this morning and was like, hey, I shaved my beard, like I'm silky smooth. And so we're like, oh, it's like a date. You just gotta make it up. Yeah,
totally. I just started Star Trek the original series today, so that's funny. Yeah, we're trying to do the same thing, trying to make special things. So like we'll order some wine, have it delivered, and we'll do like a board game night and just 2-player game or something, have some music playing, and then fall asleep to John Oliver or something like that, right? But just some little things. Or we won't have dinner. We'll when we go grocery shopping, we'll get like a charcuterie board or something, like, oh, we're having fancy wine and cheese, and then we'll fall asleep on the couch and complain that our back hurts. But that's real talk. So what are some of the things you guys really miss? Like if there was one thing that you really miss. So I think the thing that this time has given me an opportunity to sort of reflect on is like all the little things that now that I'm deprived of them, how much I miss them. And one of them is that commute time, right? Like as much as I used to complain about like, oh, then I got to do this and then I really miss like getting up, leaving, getting on the train and having that 25 or 30 minutes to myself. I've noticed that I'm not reading as much as I used to because that's predominantly where I did most of my reading. So now I've been trying to simulate my commute where I'll try to be out the door by 8 o'clock and I'll come into the office and I'll just read for 30 minutes. And then after that, I'll turn around and log into work and say, all right, guys, I'm here. Let's get it started. But you know, that sort of like decompression and transition time, I didn't realize how important it was to me. And now I'm realizing even more so now because I don't have any transition time whatsoever. But for you guys, what are you guys sort of missing in this whole thing?
Man, that's real. I realized I don't have any of those podcasts I used to listen to or any of those things that came up in the commute time. But yeah, for me, I think it's mostly just my family. You know, my extended family. We purposely live pretty close to my parents and my in-laws and my brother and his family. And with a 2-year-old, it's really not the same to Zoom with them. Like she's really missing chasing her cousins around and those things. But yeah. So I think for me, it's the actual physical closeness to other people is the thing I miss the most. But I think that transition time is probably a close second. I did recently take up crocheting, which I hadn't done in years. Actually, I finished the blanket that I started when I was pregnant with the 2-year-old. So it had been, so to say how long it had been. So that's been something I've been trying to make time for, to at least have something I'm doing.
Yeah, I don't think I missed the commute quite as much because I was doing a lot of driving, just because of having to drop the kids off. But I do miss like having that really firm schedule, because I knew that we had to be out the house with the kids by like 7:45 to get them to school on time. I knew I was going to get into work at about 8:30. I knew that I'd have to leave work right at 5 to go pick them up because nobody wants to have their kids be the last kids waiting to get picked up at school. And then getting home, eating dinner, getting them to bed, and knowing like I do miss having that a little bit more set. As time has gone on, I think it's kind of just been like waking up closer to whenever, getting them downstairs and fed closer to, a little bit closer to 8 o'clock or 8:30, and like that time just keeps slipping and getting them to bed later. And then, when that happens, we don't have as much time to talk with each other before we start getting tired. And so I do miss having something a little bit more like clean cut when things are happening during the day, and even on the weekends, because we had a lot of activities that we took them to that we were used to doing, and we kind of liked, and the kids obviously liked them too. So I definitely miss that. I miss getting to hang out with my friends. At least, it's not something that you get to do a ton, but on a monthly basis, at least getting together and being able to see people. And it hasn't happened yet, but once it starts getting warm, I'm really gonna miss being able to like walk around, just walk around, and kind of hop on a divvy bike and ride somewhere, ride to work or whatever I can. Definitely gonna miss that stuff.
All right, well, we're out of time. I want to leave it on two positive notes really quick. One, there was a comment in the channel about people experiencing the positivity of their relationships, right? Spending this much time with your partners and realizing like, wow, we're a great team. We can do this. So that's been really rewarding. And then the second one, since the panel is all Chicago representation, how do you deal with the fact that when you get your Italian beef sandwich delivered, if you ordered it dipped, it's way too soggy? Like, I just can't even get it dipped anymore. I'm just like, yo, can I get the sauce on the side?
We got beef last night. We got a beef last night, and we both specifically didn't order it dipped so that it would come the right amount of soggy. We figured it out.
All right. Cool.
I can't understand why anybody would order it dipped.
Oh, you wrong, Eryan. and you roll.
I mean, right now you just can't get it delivered like that. It's impossible.
Right. The shelf life on that is pretty short.
All right, Eryan and team, it's been great chatting with you guys. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Stay safe.
Thanks, Jeff.